right, good morning. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Good Race Show, where we do our daily devotions together and we commit to running the good race so as to win the prize daily. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great. You?
Excellent.
Happy Wednesday.
So, let's get the day kicked off with our daily proverb from Proverbs 365. Today's proverb comes from chapter 21, verses 26 and 27. Some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. The sacrifice of an evil person is detestable, especially when it is offered with wrong motives. It's interesting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're taught is that when you give with a joyful spirit. You don't want to be like, uh, just doing it out of um, responsibility, and you also don't want to be doing it just to get something back, right? Like you don't want to say, "Hey, I'm gonna give you this really great thing," and then just use it against the person every time they see you, right? Like you
Hmm.
I don't want to say, "Hey, I'm going to buy you lunch today." And then the next time I see you, "Hey, remember that time I bought you lunch?" And constantly bringing you up. Like that's just it's not pretty.
Okay, I'll stop bringing that up. Um, but again, you are welcome. No, just kidding. Um, so, uh, I thought immediately, it says the sacrifice of an evil person is detestable. So it's almost like it's something that they're giving up, almost like in a Christian way. And
Okay.
so I'm not saying this is the only thing the verse is talking about, but I thought about people who are doing Christian things, right? People who are doing mission trips, for the gram, or people who are preaching and they have churches and they go around, but they're doing it because they found a way to make themselves uber wealthy and famous.
Yeah.
And it's like there's nothing more of a turnoff than when you have the pastor who drives a Bentley and there's a bunch of I went down a YouTube rabbit hole, which is not uncommon for me, and it was a bunch of like different pastors and videos that basically are showing the hypocrisy of a pastor have a lot of views. If we had a good story about that, we would get tons of views for that. So something to think about. But no, like the tax fraud. I mean, one of them is in front of a court trying to justify his expenses, and it's like, so you have Bentley and two houses, and you've written off the houses as a business expense. And it's like the whole thing is like millions of dollars, and he's all squirming. It's like, they're so confident saying, look at what God has done for us, until they're in front of a court. And then he's like scratching his head and stumbling and stammering. It's like, yeah,
Are you saying that was wrong?
yeah. Well, he knew it on the, when you're on the stand in front of a judge, you're
You
not
said
talking to your congregation.
golden
What's that?
so that okay, but golden toilets, that's not okay? Are you sure?
Well,
Se Seems kind of okay.
yeah, I think Trump has golden toilets, so we're not going to talk bad about that because some of our listeners.
Is that true?
I'm just
'Cause
teasing.
I've heard rumors of these golden toilets. I can't imagine that being comfortable. It's a good conductor of, heat, and you think it would just, like, make your bottom cold. I don't have anything to do with that.
Speaking of Trump, he's actually about half a mile away from me right now.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
he's in. I live in Newport Beach, and he's has a fundraiser here,
okay.
and so I went down there just for fun, um, and saw the crowds. Everybody's there first thing in the morning. It's crazy. I mean, just him being in the area
Yeah.
causes huge amounts of people to show up just for a chance to see him drive by.
Yeah, and, do you know how much money it takes to take the president, and move him from one place to another. It's unbelievable the amount of cars and police and like it's just unbelievable.
I
Like
would
I
have thought it was ridiculous, except when you see the amount of people that it attracts.
yeah.
And, the vast majority are fans. The
Yeah.
vast majority are all there to cheer him on. But, it also brings out the people who don't cheer him on. So, I mean, you've got to, I don't care who the president is, you got to keep him safe because if the president's not safe, it's going to throw things into chaos. So, anyway,
Yeah.
just kind of interesting. He's in my neck of the woods, and that's all I have to say about that. So today is Wednesday. So we have question of the Wednesday. This is where we ask a question every week and answer it. Hopefully, we can get some participation. And if you've got an answer for the question of the Wednesday, submit it to the Good Race Show on Instagram, the Good Race Show on Facebook, or email us at, you guessed it, thegoodraceshow@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Send us, and we might take some select participants and insert it into the show too.
Yeah.
So the question this week is, what's the most beautiful place that you have ever been? I'll answer that. So will Steve after our scripture reading. Steve, what's our scripture today?
Scripture reading is from Romans 3, 1 through 8. Then what's the advantage of being a Jew? Is there any value in ceremony of circumcision? Yes, there are great benefits. First of all, the Jews were entrusted with the whole revelation of God. True, some of them were unfaithful, but just because they were unfaithful does that mean that God will be unfaithful? Of course not. Even if everyone else is a liar, God is true. As the scriptures say about him, you will be proved right in what you say, and you will win your case in court. But some might say, our sinfulness serves a good purpose, for it helps people see how righteous God is. It, it isn't it unfair then for him to punish us? This is merely a human point of view. Of course not. If God were not entirely fair, how would he be qualified to judge the world? But someone might still argue, how can God condemn me as a sinner if my dishonesty highlights his truthfulness and brings him more glory? And some people even slander us by claiming that we say the more sin, the better it is. Those who say such things deserve to be condemned. And that's from Romans 3, 1 through 8.
Interesting. I don't know. I'm sure I've read this before, but I'm not sure that I have ever really thought about this passage. I think this is kind of an interesting view that I really haven't contemplated. I don't really understand what argument he's refuting. Do you have any idea on what was your takeaway here?
So this reminds me of another spot in the Bible where it's like, should we keep on sinning and allow grace to abound, right? Or abound?
Yep.
Um, that like it sounds kind of similar to that, but it's not really what it's saying, is it? It's saying we should sin more to make God look better, right? That's what I hear here in specifically verse 5. Some might say our sinfulness serves a good purpose, for it helps people see how righteous God is, and so we shouldn't be punished for that because we're doing a good purpose. But like this sounds totally like some weird backwards logic to get what you want. Right. Like I don't know. It's very interesting. Um, but you're right. This is not a common go-to section of the Bible for pastors to visit on a Sunday, I think.
I find that I normally relate to, I don't want to say the bad guy, but anytime it's like, well, don't do that. I normally think, well, I understand the justifications or the rationalization for basically being on the wrong side of the tracks. In this case, it seems odd to be like, well, shouldn't we just go ahead and sin all day because it demonstrates how free we are or how great God is to forgive even how terrible we are. I don't know what sin they're specifically referring to. My guess would be enjoyable vices, but I don't really know. Does that mean some of them were unfaithful? But just because they were unfaithful, does that mean God will be unfaithful? Of course not. Even if everyone else is a liar, God is true. As the scriptures say about him, you will be proved right in what you say, and you will win your case in court. It's it's interesting. The
Yeah.
some might say our sinfulness serves a good purpose. I've heard people justify doing the wrong thing because of the right outcome. The Robin Hood thing. I only steal from the rich so that I can feed the poor.
Yeah.
So,
But
you
this is
know,
it's good to do bad because it's so bad it makes God look good.
yeah, that doesn't seem right. I mean, if you're trying to show that, God has changed you, it seems backwards logic that you would say, well, so I should be able to do whatever the heck I want and just show how great God is. Because
Yeah.
that's not going to be the conclusion from anybody looking on. If you see somebody who's just completely self indulgent, you don't think, wow, what a great God he serves. So
Yeah.
he's serving himself. And that's the conclusion you would draw because if you were to do it, you would be serving yourself. So I don't the logic of the person that he is putting forward seems kind of strange.
Yes. I rob the poor so the poor see how great God is.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't really seem to put it this way. I hate to do it, but it's not easy for me to relate to um, the the people that he's referring to in this case.
Yeah. No, I agree.
How
So,
can how can God condemn me as a sinner if my dishonesty highlights his truthfulness?
it's a win-win, God. I get to sin and you get to look good.
And some people even slander us by claiming that we say the more we sin, the better it is. Now, I have heard people who are not Christian be very annoyed with the Christian gospel message in the sense that, okay, so you're telling me that Hitler, who did all the horrible things that Hitler did, if he were to ask God to forgive him on his deathbed, then he would go to heaven and never pay for any of the horrible atrocities that he did. And so there's sort of I've heard people say with kind of a self-righteous indignation that the Christians, yeah, well, fine. You've got your I'm going to go to heaven in the end anyway. So who cares about the earth? Who cares about here and now? And if the gospel is true, then yeah, well, fine. Why not just live however you want? And then just like the thief on the cross, just throw up the Hail Mary prayer to become a Christian while you're on your deathbed, and then everything goes swept under the rug anyway.
Yeah.
So I've heard kind of that argument.
Yep.
And what's funny is the source. It seems like the source of that is the person who's annoyed that somebody could become a Christian at the end of their life after living a horrible life, doesn't deserve to go to heaven, and they should be sort of paying for their sin, which
Yeah.
is kind of funny because you couldn't pay for your sin. But
Yes.
in order for me to say that somebody else should have to pay for theirs means that I kind of believe that I could.
And that it would be more beneficial to live a sinful life all throughout your life and just like sneak it in by the end of your life. Like it's not like the hypothetical Hitler deathbed salvation story um, would mean that Hitler led this wonderful, fulfilling life, right? Like, no, the Bible paints a story that to give up your life and to, live for Christ is a fulfilling life. And Hitler, he didn't get to live life very well. I don't know. I don't know how Hitler lived, but
Yeah.
uh,
There's a sneaky assumption in there that living a sinful life is living a more enjoyable life.
yeah, and I think that's the fallacy.
That is a fallacy. But the other fallacy is that Hitler, who was obviously being completely run by the devil, um, who did or was responsible for unbelievably horrible things. That's why he's always used as the ultimate bad.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even know. I mean, you certainly don't hear of anybody named Hitler anymore. And I actually think it might be illegal. There are certain names you're not allowed to name your kids.
Huh.
And at least in the US, and it's possible that that's on the list. I should check that because I don't know for sure. But
Heard that. We
yeah,
have things that you're not allowed to call your children?
yeah, you're not allowed to name your kid Satan.
Okay.
Um, you're allowed to name your kid Demon or Damien. That's a pretty common name actually, but yeah, there's a list of names that you can't call your kids.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
And I'm part of me is surprised that there's not some parents out there fighting that just because, they want to be different or something. But
Freedom.
yeah.
Well, it goes under the kids don't have a say for it. I mean, whatever you name the kid's stuck with.
Yeah. But I think a lot of names should go into that category then.
Yeah.
I've had lots of students with some interesting names. But
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 you're right. But the point was, you know, the idea, yes, he did all this horrible stuff, but the reason why I said that is when you understand that everything you're doing by nature is self-indulgent and driven by your own wants, needs and emotions. That's completely divorced from anything that God would want. When you actually encounter God and you have a relationship with him,
yeah.
you realize that, oh, everything I've done all day, every day has been in conflict with what I would be doing. The entire motivating factor for every single act I've taken has been selfish and serving myself.
Yes.
And so the people who are the ultimate sinners, right? Yeah, their punishment should be worse because they did worse stuff here on earth. But as far as eternity is concerned, it's like you're either walking and you were changed and allowing God to change you daily, or you were living completely for yourself. And living completely for yourself looks really bad for some people, looks really pretty good from the outside to other people, but they're kind of the same. You put yourself in a much better spot when you think that that person shouldn't be able to become a Christian at this point. That's such a ridiculous theology.
Yeah. And no matter who you are, if God forgives you, you are forgiven a great debt. It doesn't matter who you are and what you've done. You couldn't have done it on your own, and it's like winning a lottery, right? Like this
Yep.
is the best thing that could happen to you. It's better than winning the lottery.
What? Well, that's good. So we got a good takeaway from that, I think, and I don't know that it had anything to do with what Paul's intent was, but we still managed to find a good discussion, have a good takeaway, and a good point from it. I'll talk to my dad, and he'll be like, "No, no, no. Here's what it is." He'll probably have something really smart and
G-
insightful, but I just didn't have it this time.
Yeah, I just can't not go back to the first couple sentences. What's the advantage of being a Jew? Is there any value in the ceremony of circumcision? And it's like dot dot dot. It's like, oh, okay, here we have it. And it's yes, there are great benefits. First of all, Jews were entrusted with the whole revelation of God, which is really a good benefit, but I kind of feel like maybe circumcision didn't have to necessarily be involved there. But yeah, like it's just kind of a funny line.
Yes, I get what you're saying. The circumcision, it was kind of like a, you know, well,
It was
it's
kind of like Old Testament baptism.
yeah, but it's almost it's more like it's to me it's almost like a military tattoo, right?
Okay.
Like somebody who's got the Marines on his back or on his arm or something like that. It's you're only going to get that tattoo if you're in the Marines, and then everybody else you see who has that crest, you know, you're on the same team. You had a universal shared experience. You're both part of the same purpose.
Yeah.
You serve the same end goal and you've taken the same path. And it's like God created circumcision as a way to mark his people. And so when you're a Jew and you get circumcised, there's an element of pride there from what I gather. I mean,
Yeah.
he's always saying, so what's the advantage of being a Jew? Yeah, guess what? You guys are do have benefit. You were given the whole revelation of God. You are the one who started this thing.
Yeah.
And so
Which is great, right? The whole
yeah.
revelation of God. I don't want to dismiss that. That's great. But it's,
Yeah, the circumcision thing.
and I don't want to make light of circumcision, but it's,
It's a thing that's got a lot of political heat
yeah.
because it's kind of like naming the baby.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the baby didn't get to choose. It's not something that the individual chooses. It's something that the parents choose for the kid.
Yeah.
And they say, we as a family are part of this covenant. Our family is part of the covenant of God, so we're going to show that in this way. But if you read Paul, he basically says in another part, this might be controversial to Christians, says if you're not circumcised, don't bother getting circumcised. If you are circumcised, don't try and get yourself uncircumcised. I think it's in Corinthians, and
Hmm.
they said it was because in the Greek era they did a lot of spectator sports
Okay.
and they would compete naked. And so from an audience point of view, you could tell who was identifying with the Jews and who was not. And
Okay.
so then as people were becoming Christians in their adulthood, they were trying to circumcise themselves so that they would look like the Jews. And
I
then
see.
conversely, there was other people who got circumcised when they were a baby, but they were Greek and they didn't adhere to that. And they were trying to sort of re-circumcise themselves, sort of put something back on to try and look like they were not circumcised.
Yeah.
It was a vanity thing. So anyway, we're getting way off topic here, but anyway, so the question of the Wednesday.
What is the most beautiful place you've ever been, David?
The most beautiful place I have ever been. I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of beautiful places, which is great. I think the most beautiful place I've ever been is Alaska. One time when I turned 30, I took a week off and flew to Alaska and hitchhiked around the state and then flew back. It was just a time for me to spend some time alone in the wilderness. I was 30 and I was sort of trying to emulate a little bit of, when Jesus turned 30 before his ministry, he went into the wilderness for 40 days.
Hmm.
So I did that and I went camping in various different places and it was amazing.
Did
But
you get attacked by any moose?
I did.
Okay.
Well, I had the romantic idea of I wanted to go and be in the wilderness, right? I was like committed to going into the parts where no other person had ever been
Yeah.
because I've never been in the wilderness like that before. And so on the first day, I left my campsite and I just walked off the road into the unknown. And um, then
Nothing possibly could go wrong there.
yeah, I know. Well, that was the thing. I heard I was walking along the woods and I did run into a moose. It was eating a tree. And as soon as it saw me, I thought it would run away because I'm used to deer. Deer are scared of people. And
Hmm.
so I was sort of like, boo, right? Like, go away, moose. And then instead of running away, it started walking right towards me. And then when it got like about I froze because I'm like, okay, just pretend like you're dead. And then once it got closer, then I ran. So I ran like 20 yards behind me and then I turned around and it stopped and then started walking towards me again and I would run some more and then it stopped. And it was this sort of a weird thing where it just sort of it didn't want to attack me, but it wanted me out of its territory.
Yeah.
And so once I waited for a long time, thankfully I didn't have a schedule. He eventually left. And then I kept walking and I'm starting to walk back towards my campsite, but I'm doing this sort of big circle. And then I heard this big crack of a tree. Crack. I mean, and I'm in the woods. And it's weird because in the woods, the noise is so loud that it sounds like it's probably 30 or 40 feet away from me. It doesn't sound like this is somewhere off in the distance. This
Yeah.
sounds like it's right here in the yard. And as I'm scanning around looking for where it is, I see no movement. I don't see the tree. I don't see anything because obviously it was somehow covered. The trees were thick enough it was covered. So I have this sense that I can see a long way away, but I couldn't see any movement of this thing. And all of a sudden I just hear this tree crack, 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 and tumble, and then slam on the ground. And it was not windy. And I was like, okay, whatever pushed that tree over is very close to me. And I was extremely uncomfortable. And at that point, on about probably 4 or 5 hours into day one, I decided I was a campsite guy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was gonna be I was gonna be the kind of guy that goes into
Mark.
the wilderness that has a number on it and a check-in day and time.
Yeah.
So I hitchhiked around the state, staying at places that were populated with other people.
Yep. That's a good idea.
But it was a stunningly beautiful place. And anybody who has not gone to Alaska, go south. South Alaska is way better than North. North has huge mountains, but they're all way spread apart, so it doesn't feel like you're in the mountains. It's
Okay.
actually quite flat in a lot of places with mountains kind of in the background. Southern Alaska is where you're seeing the huge glaciers and big trees and massive mountains just coming straight out of the ground, and a lot more of ocean and stuff like that. So, Southern Alaska is the beautiful part,
I'll
which
have to remember that.
I always when I got there, I thought I kept wanting to go north. I'm like, if this is the south, imagine the north. It just kept getting flatter and flatter. I was like, whoops. But good time all around.
That's awesome.
How about
I
you?
go someday. Um, all right. So the most beautiful place I've ever been, and I have backing from Good Morning America from 2011, I think. They called this the most beautiful place in America. So, and I've rarely been outside the United States. So, this is the most beautiful place I've ever been to. My family, we like to vacation up north in Michigan, right? And
Okay.
Michigan's got so many really great places to vacation, but there is specifically on Lake Michigan. So across the lake would be Illinois and
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah. And so There are sand dunes in Michigan, and right up near Traverse City, there is the Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes. And it's kind of interesting. So I take my whole family here, right? And we're going on this little, I don't know, it's this little drive. It's a national park, and you're driving, and every couple miles, there's like a stop. So you get off, and it's kind of like you look out and you see dunes, and then you get back in the car and you just go to the next one. Well, if you ever do this, make sure you stop at each one because I don't remember which one it is, but you stop at one of them. There's like 10 of them, right? And you stop at one and you walk up the path and you get to the point where all you're seeing is a bunch of dunes and it just looks like any other beach, right? But you get to this one and it's totally different. It's a cliff. It's a sand cliff. And when you get to the top, you look down like you're looking at the edge and you can't see the bottom. And you keep walking and you walk and walk and walk and you get closer and closer to the edge and you get to the point where finally you can see down to the bottom. And the picture I have here, you're actually pointing the camera down the hill so that you can see the bottom, but we're talking about a very steep hill, right? Like, wouldn't surprise me if it's close to 45 degrees.
Wow.
It's a very steep hill for 400 feet. And what's cool is, well, you get to the top and you see people walking down and climbing back up. And so you realize, okay, I could do that. But you're looking at it thinking, no, kind of looks tough. And people are coming up, they're like throwing up and sweating. And and you're like, "So how long did it take?" And
Not
they
only is it beautiful, it's painful.
yeah, and there's a sign that says, like, "If we have to call a helicopter for you, like, you're gonna have to pay for the helicopter because there's no way to get another type of vehicle up and down this sand dune."
Can you walk around it?
No, no, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. You would look like 20 miles this way and 20 miles that way. It's all sand,
Oh,
and
okay. Because you said there was 10 of them, so I'm picturing 10 hills.
it's kind of out on a peninsula.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you're driving inside where those dunes aren't, and then you walk out to the edge where the dunes are.
Okay.
And so you're looking down this hill and it's like, should we do it? And you ask people, how long does it take? And they're like, oh, it's like a half-hour long trip down and back. And so my son's like, Dad, we got to do this. We got to do this. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Running down is one of the best things you can ever do. You're running as fast as you can, and every step you take, you fall about 15 feet, and then you land with that foot, and you land in sand. There's no impact of any, you know, great
Mm-hmm.
magnitude. And then you take another step, you fall another 15 feet, and you go from the top to the bottom 400 feet in about a minute, right? And it's a blast. You get to the bottom, it's a nice little beach. The water's beautiful. You can grab some stuff like stones and shells and stuff. And then you turn around and you look up this hill and you realize what you've done, right? And when
Yeah,
you
you're
climb,
screwed.
every step you take, you sink a foot. And then you take the next step and you sink a foot. And you can't even see the top, right? Like you can see maybe 100 yards in front of you, but then like it's just sky. Like you can't see people.
Wow.
It's crazy. So I mean, you can see people that are climbing up, but it eventually you can't see the people at the top. And we did it at night, like it was just about to get dark when we did it, and we were climbing back up in total black, and there was kind of a light at the top, but we couldn't tell how far it was. And so we just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. It felt like we would never get there. It was the most frustrating thing, but it was beautiful. So,
So that counts. Well, that's amazing. We both grew up in Michigan, and all my friends have the universal experience of going out to the dunes, and somehow that eluded me. So It's a Michigan experience that I have never had, but perhaps I'll do it. And I'll be probably the guy who stays at the top after that story. No, I'm just kidding. I'll go down there. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today. Again, keep running the good race, run to win the prize, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
All right, keep running.